Hello, and welcome to Love Always Self. I'm Shyra.
Hey, y'all, I'm Karista, and thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Love Always Self. Today, we may have a triggering topic because we want to chat about triggers.
Warning.
And not just, being aware of our triggers, but also starting to take responsibility for them, which is kind of a trigger.
No shit. So it's like the trigger of just talking about the trigger. We are going to be triggered. So
Triggered.
that's cool. Totally cool.
So I know for me, I can really have a tough time with taking responsibility for my triggers. I can very quickly go into, hey, this would be really helpful if you could stop doing it this way, or something along the lines of that. But in reality, what would be more beneficial to our overall health is learning how to transmute those energies when we are triggered. So
Yeah.
taking a look at them,
Yeah.
evaluating them, being open to not judging them, and loving ourselves through them, and learning how to change our reaction
Mhm.
into responses.
It's it's one of those management moments of yourself, you know? Ooh. Ooh. You mean I'm responsible? That's crazy. I mean, it is
Yeah.
though. I mean, at the end of the day, you're fully responsible for how you react to something that is causing that,
Mhm.
that emotional state, which is hard to hear because we could always equally say, well, the other person's playing a part in triggering it in the first place.
It is a lot easier to point fingers at other people, but
Mhm.
at the end of the day, it's our reality that we need to work on adjusting, our internal environment.
Which is hard because then you have to take a good look at yourself. You have to come
Ugh.
down
Yeah. That
to,
mirror can be brutal sometimes.
and everything around you is a mirror of yourself. So, like, that is even more messed up in my head sometimes and trying to wrap my brain around it, even just thinking about it. I'm like, how is it that even me talking to you in some of the situations that you and I have, gone through and discussed, and you know what it's making me think of is being able to relate, right? Like
Mhm.
relating to somebody when they're going through an experience. You're like, wow, I've been through something like that before. And
Mhm.
I never thought of it until literally right this second that that could be that reflection of self,
Mhm.
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Just had a mind blowing moment. That moment.
One way that I like to look at the word responsibility is disconnecting the response and the ability. Not disconnecting, but
It's a
like
good one.
looking at that one word as two words. So, what is your ability to respond in a situation? And that is your responsibility.
And how are you feeling about that? Because I mean, you're gonna create yourself your own environment based on how you do respond.
Mhm.
And it could either perpetuate whatever situation is when you're being triggered, or it could bring you back into that thing that we always talk about, that 0 point neutrality of zooming all the way out and looking at it from different perspectives. And
Absolutely.
sometimes you have to do that even with yourself, looking at
A
different
lot of
perspectives.
times.
Right, right.
Yeah, with yourself. That's the self-reflection and self-healing and self-care and uh, learning how to navigate those things. It takes time, it takes practice, it takes create or having intention to create awareness. So I know we've said this in previous episodes, but it all starts with
Yeah.
wanting to feel different, wanting to make a change within yourself. And it can start off bumpy ride, right?
Yeah.
Like where you're still going through the same patterns and same emotions, still being triggered by the same thing. And but the difference is you start reflecting on that afterwards and ask yourself, why am I being triggered? What is this rooted in? And how would I like to see myself respond to this instead? How would I like to feel in that response?
Yeah. And there's this like analytical moment where, the brain takes over. And because a lot of times when we are talking about spirituality topics and things of that nature, we are talking about uh, spirit, right? Um, it's not to forget that we do have a human brain that does do its operations and
Mhm.
puts us into a certain state. And a lot of the basis of our brain is based off of what have you been doing.
Mhm.
So unlearning all of that as is a portion of opening your awareness to yourself and
Mhm.
being aware of the moments and catching yourself in those moments when it's occurring, because there's
Mhm.
many times that I've been triggered and I just like fly off the handle. Poor Steven, so sorry babe. And like, I have my moments, right? And then later I'll have like a awareness of,
Mhm.
oh, why was I so triggered by that? Like what caused me to have that kind of an emotional reaction? And then as you start to practice that, opening your awareness to it, then you start to become a little bit more aware of it sooner. And then you'll get to a place where you're already thinking about that before you even react.
Mhm.
So it is a
Mhm.
process. And sometimes it takes a lot of work to get there, but it doesn't have to. So I also want to make
Mhm.
sure I say that it doesn't have to.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that that's forever. It just means that with practice, your ability will improve.
Hmm.
I think one of the toughest steps is when you're catching yourself in the act
Hmm.
and then you work on transitioning into that more or less reactive state. It can be really tough when the other person isn't actively on board or aware of what you're trying to do, as far as adjusting or learning how not to be so reactive to your triggers. It can be helpful to communicate where you're at and what you're trying to do, but it's not their responsibility to create that space for you either. It's your responsibility. It's nice, it's helpful, it's really lovely when they do match those needs, but the need needs to be met truly by you.
Yeah. And also, um, what do you wait, what's the words that you always say to me? It's yes and.
Yes,
So
and
it's I love that. Anyway, yes and.
that
And
validates, first of all, and acknowledges that the other person, what they have said.
mhm,
And then it makes that connection rather than making it feel like you're not being paid attention or having that attention paid to what you just said. So,
right.
yes, and.
Yes and. I don't even remember what I was gonna say, I'll
Oh,
be
sorry.
honest. No, it's cool. It left. It yes and out of here.
Yes, and right out the door.
Yeah, we're totally not recording on our normal days of the week, so hey.
It's all good. Just
That's fine.
winging it. So, I know that a lot of our triggers can also be created from patterns from our childhood, whether it was lack of security, whether that was emotional, financial, physical, whatever kind of security that you were lacking. And a lot of times, our trigger responses can be connected to the ego reactions that are that our body and mind have put into place to protect us from harm, from you know being hurt physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever. So recognizing that this was a pattern that was created to keep you safe.
Yeah. Your brain will literally program its your body, yourself to say like you go in, I'm just going to jump into this other thing, but like say like you go in and you're scared of the dark. Okay?
Okay.
And every time you're presented with being in a room that's too dark or whatever, your immediate emotional state and reaction is to be in a fear-based place.
Mhm.
And you're like, no, 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 I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Right.
Mhm.
So you've now told your brain to associate darkness with being in fear,
Fear.
and then
Mhm.
your body to react a certain way into being in that place, right? So now every time you have any kind of association with darkness, you're now going to trigger yourself into this pattern and this behavior when it is a type of fear that you can overcome.
Mhm. Mhm.
So just that's just like a random example that I decided to pull out. So, yeah.
And one of the steps that you can insert into this growth that we're working on is to practice visualizing yourself in those experiences and visualize yourself handling or responding in the way that you want to move towards, and do this over and over again. And that is actually just creating that unlearning process and relearning. And that too is a form of practice that you can use without actually inserting yourself into the actual situation that you were triggered by.
Yep. That's a good
Mhm.
one. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been practicing that with my triggers, actually. And they are
I
improving.
that
It's getting better. And I think that it's such a good opportunity to practice healing that
it
inner
is.
child, that scared self, that and provide yourself with what you needed in those moments that may have, started that trigger.
Yeah. I've I think, if we were to like try to list a few of things that are triggering for us, just to relate in some way for the listeners. Um
Oh gosh, put me on the spot. Okay, you go first.
You're welcome. So I would say that one of my biggest triggers is uh feeling judged,
Mhm.
right? Feeling judged over how I talk is a big one. Because there's this like, I don't know, stereotype apparently about the way I look versus the way I talk. It's weird to me. So that's a trigger for me. Clearly, I just
Mhm.
reacted to it.
Mhm.
So
You triggered yourself.
I've triggered myself. See how that works? Do you see how that works? Um, yeah, that's one for me for sure.
One of mine is being talked over or talked through, and me feeling invisible and unheard and lacking in value. And I think that's important, or this is a good opportunity for me to acknowledge that part of that is rooted in me learning how to value myself more.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Well, I love you, just so
I
we're
love
clear,
you.
and I value you.
And I don't judge you.
So, just kidding.
Because if
Or
I'm
not.
judging you, I'm actually judging myself because we're all connected and part of one.
This is so true. Oh my gosh. Say it louder for the crowd in the back, please.
Nope, not going to repeat. You're just going to have to rewind.
Rewind from here 10 seconds
Re-listen
ago.
to that. Because if
Or
I'm
not.
judging you, I'm actually judging myself because we're all connected and part of one.
I mean, that could not, I mean, if anyone takes anything away from everything that we ever say, that is the biggest takeaway, honestly. Just knowing that you are also every single thing and person else. Like, it all stems from you in the end. You're part of it all. So what you're doing and saying and being towards others does actually impact you, and you're doing it to yourself.
Mhm. That, I mean, do unto others as you want them to do unto you. Golden rule.
Yeah.
It makes sense when you
Because
look
that
at it from
changes
this
everything.
perspective. Yeah.
It changes everything. If you come to terms with that statement, it changes absolutely everything. And
Hmm.
that was something when it finally sunk in for me. And when I realized the things that I've learned or started, practicing and believing in and, whatever, and this like overwhelming knowledge of that and how it all relates, we're going to thank Mount Glass for that one. So that changes everything because
Hmm.
if, one of my triggers happens to be bad drivers, I've mentioned that a few times. So if I'm on the road and I start getting angry at somebody else, I know that how I'm impacting that individual is also impacting me,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. On a cellular level.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Doesn't
Absolutely.
doesn't mean I've learned my lesson though. I'm still working on it. I'm human.
One other uh, recommendation, if you find yourself in a situation where you're being triggered, and if you're able to create space and time to allow that heightened energy to come down just a little bit so that you can take a few minutes to reflect on how you would prefer to be responding versus reacting, then do that. Absolutely take advantage of that. Does that always happen? No, we're not always graced with that opportunity to step back. But when we can, just take a nice deep breath. Even using our breath for 5-10 seconds gives us a little bit of time to evaluate.
And
Recenter.
right. And if you find yourself in a relationship or in a, relationship can be anything, not just romantic, but like if you find yourself in a relationship and say you're being triggered by another person and you're now in the midst of that emotional reaction that you've just been doing and you're going to take the advice that what Carrie just said, sometimes you'll get this thought process that the person that I'm talking to doesn't allow that to happen as if they hold the power for this, right? So I I'm actually kind of guilty of this occasionally with my poor dude. So like I will be like, no, 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 we're gonna discuss this right now. And it took you actually explaining to me certain reasons why you need to step back and take some breathers and all that fun stuff. And like that actually helped me in my relationship. So I'm gonna pay that advice forward on this podcast right now and just say that yes, if you are an individual that needs more time to process so you can calm down or so you can think and and have those that time to do the things that we're talking about in this practice session, right? You need to set a boundary with the individual that you're speaking with and just let that be known.
Hmm.
So, because if you just walk away, it infuriates the other person. They have no
Yeah,
idea what's going on. So, like,
right.
right.
I am absolutely not saying just turn around and walk away because
Oh, no, I know.
yeah, but yeah, whenever you can,
Yeah.
yes, and whenever you can,
Thanks. I love it.
have that conversation with that person that you're in that relationship with. That's only going to create a better bond. It's going to create more safety, feeling safe. It makes you feel valued because they're respecting that need that you have, and you are showing respect to yourself and showing value to yourself, and that it's okay to take time to process and to come up with a response. And it feels a lot better.
It does.
Feels a lot better to respond than it does to react, because then I find myself backtracking and being like, nope, I didn't mean exactly what I said. This is what I meant. And so it can create a lot of confusion and misunderstanding and misrepresentation of what we're actually feeling towards that other person if we continue to react. Not everybody's the same, sharing my experiences.
Right.
Mhm.
And you'll definitely find yourself in a position of having a much higher intelligent conversation when you've had a moment to think things through.
And then it becomes more about finding common ground,
Mhm.
finding how to navigate together
Right.
than feeling like you are against each other. You are discussing rather than trying to convince.
Because at the end of the day, you're only having an emotional reaction because you love yourself and you love the others.
Hmm. Hmm. Yep.
Okay.
And with that,
We're doing it quick and dirty today. Sorry.
little trigger.
Please do not forget if you are watching this on YouTube or if you're on any of our podcasting platforms listening, hit the follow, hit the likes,
Mhm,
do the bells and
mhm.
whistles and all that fun jazz if you are in alignment with what we're talking about today.
And we also have a donation button on our Love Always Self website. So don't forget to support us that way. We could always use a little extra to keep creating this awesome experience and these great episodes for you guys. And then one last announcement. We just wanted to let you guys know that we have a couple special guests that we will be
Yes.
interviewing in the next few weeks. So we're very excited to have them on. The first one is Heather Emerson with Prep to Your Door. Super excited about that. She created her own business out of her home and is now delivering healthy, sustainable, environmentally conscious, body conscious foods to your door.
So yummy.
Mhm,
She is
mhm.
beautiful. So, and then our follow up guest to that is going to be Katie, Light Within Coaching. She's on TikTok. She is brilliant. She says the best things, and they are also sometimes really funny. I cannot wait to have that conversation with her.
So stay tuned for the coming up interviews and the next episodes. And don't forget how much we love you. And don't forget to love first
Love last.
and love always.
Mwah! Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
y'all. Hey, listener, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us in this moment. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and we look forward to our next connection.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow to stay notified of new content from Love Always Self. If you have any questions or topics you'd like for us to discuss, please hit us up on any of our social media platforms linked in the show notes below.
I'm Karista.
And I'm Shyra.
And until next time, remember to love first
Love last.
and love always. Love Always Self podcast is meant for entertainment purposes only. We do not make any warranties about the completeness, reliability, and accuracy of the information presented in this podcast. Any action you choose to take upon the information in this podcast is strictly done so at your own risk, and we will not be held liable for any losses and damages in connection with the use of our podcast. Any and all medical concerns should be addressed with a licensed healthcare provider, as well as any questions that may be derived from the information discussed in this podcast.